Deputy Catherine Connolly.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think public service broadcasting is an essential ingredient of a functioning democracy, and anything we can do to support public service broadcasting we should do. Now, within that comment, this bill is very specific, and I only want to raise two particular issues. One is in relation to the Irish language minister, and one is in relation to community radios. And Deputy Dooley has already referred to this matter in relation to community radios. And I'm not so sure why the Broadcasting Authority has been left with a discretion in relation to the imposition of a levy on a community radio. But even more importantly, that a community radio with an income of over 250,000 will be subjected to the levy. And as already been pointed out, that income is coming from the state. So it's one arm of the state giving money and the other arm of the state imposing a levy. So it doesn't make sense to me. So if you could look at that, I'd appreciate that in relation to it. The second matter then is in relation to the Broadcasting Act, which you're amending in certain respects. But there's absolutely no mention of the Irish language. And I'm not sure if you gave consideration to that, or if you if there's still time to do that. And I refer you in the first instance to the Tuarascáil na dúchláin a bhaineann le creaaltóireacht na Gaeilge, agus sin Tuarascáil a d'ailtimid Baltana just cúpla mí ó hin 2009, and that was the challenges facing broadcasting in Irish, and we reported that the committee in May of this year, and we made a number of recommendations, and two of them are very, very basic. Maidir le reachtaíocht agus rialú. Go treisiófaí le práin na mireanna faoin Gaeilge san nach Creailechán 2009 chun cur cumas údarás Creailechán na hÉireann, policy Gaeilge gníomhacha a Orbert I bart le creaaltóirí an Stát. Agus an dara mula go natnófaí creaaltóireacht na Gaeilge mar phríomh gúlgas in ein sanmhaoinú nua de creaaltóireacht Hirvísí Peibli in ein reachtaíocht cumarsáide lasia nó nuacht dréachtaíocht. And so I come in English, go back to that, and what we clearly asked for was that the 2009 Broadcasting Act be amended, and there are a number of specific provisions in that. They're very specific, and they're just not strong enough in relation to when a commercial radio station is granted a licence. And I'm going to just go into it a little bit. There is an obligation in relation to the Irish language, but it's extremely weak, number one. Number two, the monitoring of that is extremely weak. And we asked, having listened to a number of presentations before the committee, that that be looked at with the view to increasing the power of the Broadcasting Authority in the first place, and with the view to increasing the duty on the radio stations to comply with the obligation to broadcast in Irish. And where that arose from, it arose from a number of presentations, but one in particular I'll refer you to, Minister, and it's in relation to the research from Dr. John Walsh, University College Galway, and Dr. Rosemary Day, Coláiste de Muirgan Small, Ulster Limney. And that piece of research was very interesting, and they pointed out in 30 years of broadcasting local radios, no research had been done on whether the local stations were complying with their duty, however weak that was under the 2009 Act. And so they looked, and they came before our committee twice, and their research looked at, they contacted 59 stations, 53 answered, which was a pretty good response. And then the 53 stations answered them, and in a collaborative way, the station said, no, we're not broadcasting in Irish, or broadcasting very little for the following reasons or whatever. So it was done in a collaborative way, and both researchers went back a second time and then came before my committee. And just in relation to it, the findings. The number of weekly hours broadcast in Irish or bilingually is very low compared to the station's overall outputs. The average weekly output is 3.23 hours, including repeats. For the most part, programmes in Irish are broadcast outside peak hours, that's after 7 p.m. at night time, overnight or early on Sunday morning. Of the commercial stations, by far the highest weekly Irish language output is from, and this is interesting, youth stations, iRadio, and they have much higher output. However, the majority of these hours are broadcast overnight when listenership is negligible. Removing the iRadio, which is the youth radio, would decrease the average output to less than 2 hours per week per station, less than 2 hours per week per station. The next highest output of any station is on the Spin youth station. 6 hours on both the Southwest and the 103.8 stations, or 3.6 of their output. I could go on and give more figures. The message from this research, interestingly, is that the stations directed to the youth had a higher content of Irish programmes, and the other stations had minimum or nothing. The research revealed that 5 stations, 4 of them commercial, and I have to say Galway Bay was one of them in Galway, since improved, Galway Bay FM, KCLR FM, Midwest Radio and Today FM, and 1 community radio broadcast no Irish at all in their schedules. 4 commercial radios have no dedicated Irish language or bilingual programme and broadcast only Irish language or bilingual inserts 3 or 4 times a week. And then, quite astoundingly, in relation to Gaeltacht communities, and all of this research is not about Radio na Gaeltacht. This is not involved in that research, just commercial radio stations and community ones. There are Gaeltacht districts in 7 counties, and they list them out. None of the local Cork stations broadcast full programmes in Irish. And they go through Cork, Kerry, Galway. Galway, despite a large Gaeltacht area in Galway, no Irish language material is broadcast on the local radio station, although it has improved minimally since. Mayo West broadcasts nothing in Irish, although there are Gaeltacht areas in its area. Donegal, Highland Radio, 3.37 hours per week, and so on. The absence of Irish language programming on local stations is significant due to their high listenership within their franchise area, and as successive research has shown. Now, I won't go on because it's late, Minister, and I think the point I've made that there's a serious problem here in relation to the weakness of the Broadcasting Act 2009. Their conclusions, 30 years after the legislation of independent radio in Ireland, the Irish language has only a marginal role on radio stations, other than those broadcasting in Irish. This is in spite of statutory provisions under the 2009 Act regarding Irish in the licensing process that obliges all stations to include in it their programming. With a small number of exceptions, stations broadcast only minimal amounts of Irish and almost invariably outside of peak hours. The legislation is weak and imprecise regarding the Irish language. There is a specific section, I just don't have it in front of me, and it talks about the Contracts Awards Committee under the Broadcasting Authority is obliged only to have regard to Irish when making a decision on awarding a licence. Have regard to, and even that regard to is not spelled out. There are many other recommendations in relation to the Broadcasting Authority itself, but in relation to the government, the very specific recommendation was on Reachtaíocht a Freisin to strengthen the 2009 Act. And I would hope, Minister, you would look at it. It's very, very specific. It isn't a huge amount of work, and it's to just look at the Broadcasting Act in relation to 2 or 3 sections to strengthen the ability of the Broadcasting Authority, to insist that there's a certain level of Irish programmes broadcast on the commercial radio stations and the community radio stations. And it's difficult for me to stand here mar cheachtadala as cahar gáithangach atá Harsach na Gaeltacht this most tír agus a bheithir an ólas inis trucha blina tá réis na stáisiún ag teachtar an éir nach bhfuil Gaeilge beag nach bhfuil gaeilge be fearmhór na radio. So it's difficult for me to stand here and have to say that. I won't take up any more time. I would hope that the government would look on it. If not, I'll be forced to bring in amendments. I prefer to work with you in relation to it, given our obligations under the Constitution in relation to the Irish language, and given that this piece of legislation is absolutely suitable to doing that by adding on just a few sections. Go to Míle Mágat.